klokslag 8 uur, we zijn er weer. Ik kijk er enorm naar uit, want dit is een van de eerste whiskies, de eerste betere whiskies, om het zo te zeggen, die ik zelf geproefd heb. Dus ik ben zeer vereerd om Paul Ashton te ontmoeten. Trouwens, op onze aankondiging stond zijn naam fout geschreven, heeft hij mij zojuist op gewezen. Het is dus zonder de H. Niettemin zijn wij zeer verheugd om hem te verwelkomen. Ik ga jullie niet langer in spanning houden. Hier is hij dan, the one and only Paul Ashton. Hi, Paul.
Hiya.
Nice to meet you. Meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
It's a strange time because we were saying earlier on, in normal times we would have met by now in person, but just the next best thing we can do. So I hope you're looking forward to it.
I am, yeah.
Okay. I have another guest in the back. I will bring him on. It's Johan Laermans. For those who don't know Johan, it's the new best man in for young Charlie, but more important is my old mentor in the whiskey business. So here he is. Hello, Johan.
Hello. Hi, guys. How are you?
So, Paul, we date back without you knowing until 2012, I think. Johan, am I correct? I think so.
Yeah. 2012. Yes.
Those day, Johan told me about a little brand, Deerstalker, and he said you have to try these whiskies, and I was sold at the first sip. So I'm really happy having you here and looking forward what you can tell about us. And here are some first people who are saying hi. So our fans are back in town. So
Hi.
Paul, let's start with your brand. It's, of course, it's one of the most iconic figures because everybody knows the head, but nobody knows where it comes from. Deerstalker whiskey since 1880. What does it mean, Deerstalker?
Okay, well, if you go back to essentially a Scottish estate, so you have an estate in the Highlands, and on that estate you've got grouse, and you've got salmon fishing, you've got forestry, and you've got deer. And basically those are the four key elements that keep Scottish Highland estates in business. And you have a gilly for the salmon, but for the deer, you really have a gamekeeper. And that person is actually a deerstalker. When you look at your Highland estates, Scotland is home to 40% of the red deer population in Europe. And there are no natural predators, wolves. There are no wolves or anything in the Highland, well, anywhere in Britain. So that estate needs to be managed, that population of deer needs to be managed. And what a deerstalker does, he'll take his estate guests out on a day, either to photograph deer or actually to cull the deer, to shoot some of the deer. Mm-hmm. It's not inhumane. It has to be done because otherwise the red deer population would literally swamp the Highlands.
Okay.
So basically, he is one of the key elements within a Highland estate.
Okay.
Venison. Do you call deer meat venison in Belgium?
No, we don't have one. We get how you say it in English, a forceman, because I have no idea how they call it in the English. Johan, do you know?
Not directly, no.
The Dutch is a boswachter, but I don't have a clue what it's called in English.
Can you buy deer meat if you went to?
You can buy deer meat, but it's not in every butcher shop. No.
Okay, well, we call it venison. It's incredibly lean. I mean, if you fry a venison steak, there's virtually no fat that comes off it. It's becoming very popular. So it's actually it's a valuable asset to a Highland estate, and I suppose that's really the start of the Deerstalker story. You can go back 200 years and you'll find, for example, this is a book, Highland Deerstalker, which was written by a guy called Colin Gibson, and this sort of traces the history of stalking within the Highlands.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're sort of, we go on about it a little bit in the label. They're sort of fiercely independent people who, are up at all times tracking deer. But but there's also the sort of romantic side of it. If you go to the time of Victoria and Albert, Queen Victoria essentially lived in London. She married Prince Albert, and they settled in the Highlands for quite a period of time, particularly in the summer, around about 1848. And they initially rented, and then they bought an estate called Balmoral. And they ran that estate in the same way that you run an ordinary Highland estate. So they had various, they had salmon fishing, they had deer stalking, and all these elements they sort of started to come together. So they started to get an interest in tartan, in Highland games, and of course in whiskey. So when they went back down to London, they would take all these things with them. So the whiskey as a drink, which was obviously just in Scotland, suddenly started to move to the south. People in London who at that time were drinking gin suddenly started to get an interest in the sort of Highland, the romance of the Highlands, this beautiful, clean, fresh air, clean water. Whereas in places like London at the time, it was pretty squalid. So yeah. I think that started to sort of set the tone where people started to look at Scotland and the Highlands in particular and see it as fresh and clean. It also started. You then started to get this sort of royal patronage, like Royal Lochnagar. It was the royal patronage of one or two distilleries in the Highlands, all around about the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s.
Okay.
It also sort of coincided. Have you heard of phylloxera, which was a vine disease?
No.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that happened around about 1860. And so in Europe, a lot of the indigenous, the French, the Italian, German vines were killed by this disease.
Yeah.
And it meant that there was actually a shortage of wine in Europe. So instead of the sort of the wine and the brandy drinkers trying to get hold of wine, they actually turned to other things. And this was a time when Scotch whisky was becoming more popular in Britain. And that sort of coincided then with Europeans, if you like, being introduced to Scotch. So all of that sort of happened really around about 1860 to about 1890. But you also mentioned, that you showed the image of the hat. And I'm not the only one who has one of these, incidentally, today.
No, someone else has
one. And I'm
one.
the only one in Belgium.
You can put it on, Johan.
Does it fit? I don't know if I got the right size for you.
Okay, I don't know why, but both hats are too big for your hats.
Yes.
So very often when you mention a deerstalker, this is the thing that comes to mind. This is a deerstalker hat, and it was worn by deerstalkers. If you imagine you're up in the Highlands in the wintertime, it's blowing a gale, it's freezing cold, it's wet. This is a hat that's made out of Harris tweed, so it's basically a woolen hat. It has a brow at the front and the back. And what the stalker would do is he'd bring it down, tie it under his chin to keep it in place. And it would afford him a fantastic amount of protection, a bit like Gore-Tex today. So that really was the sort of deerstalker hat. And you still see stalkers today wearing that hat. But there's clearly one character who is sort of recognized more than anything else. You might...
Sherlock Holmes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whenever I do a tasting somewhere, the first thing that if I say to somebody deerstalker, they immediately think of Sherlock Holmes because of the deerstalker hat.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of when I first saw the bottle. It was, why do they put Sherlock Holmes on the bottles?
Yeah. Well, he was a fictional character, and he first appeared in print again. I think it was 1887, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So he wrote a series of articles initially, or short stories, and that is exactly it. That is the deerstalker, and those were then they went into print as books, and then they were depicted. That this character was always wearing this deerstalker hat, and then the films obviously had him wearing the deerstalker hat. So that's. So really, in terms of the sort of brand story, the deerstalker is actually a key element in a Highland estate. and the hat that he wears is this. And then he's now known partly because of Sherlock Holmes. So that's really what a Deerstalker is.
Okay, because when I talk about Deerstalker, the whiskey part, of course, I always remember these old-time bottlings. Johan will remember them too.
Of course.
And they were, for to say, it were not the most handsome bottles, but they had something. You loved them because it was different than all the others. And I'm wondering, what was the idea about it? Was it just you knew it would be different than all the others, or it was just we like it this way?
Well, when I became involved in Deerstalker whiskey, well, I'll tell you what. Here's an example of the very earliest label.
Can you keep it a little bit closer?
Yeah, there you go.
That's better. Yeah.
That is an 1880 label.
Okay.
Here's another one as well. This is
okay.
So these were the early labels, and you've got to admit they were fairly basic, really.
Yeah.
And I think that the label that we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was the label that you just showed, which in some ways, I guess, it had a stalker on it, and it was sort of sepia toned.
Yeah.
So I think that was just designed because it was supposed to look old, sort of dated,
yeah,
but sort of traditional.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was fine for its time, but probably it's now changed quite a lot. And, partly because we have modern day stalkers, and I think it just wanted to reflect that more than anything else.
The new bottles are really, really, really nice as well. They are different. I will show them. These are the main bottles, I think. The unpeated and the Highland.
These are the two. These are our blended malts, and they are two, as you say, two editions: peated edition and a Highland edition.
Okay. And how many single malts are there in there? In the Highland, for example?
There's 7 in. So in the Highland, well, the reason we did those two, Gunther, was that we've done 12-year-olds and we've done some single cask, and I felt that that we were missing something in between. So we've actually sort of got 3 specific categories for Deerstalker. But the blended malt, we wanted to do a Highland edition because I think we had access to some nice whiskies. There's some Balmenic in there. There's some Macduff in there. But there's 7 whiskies between the ages of 7 and 11.
Okay. So Mark was asking new look. Definitely, it's a new look.
Yes.
But with the Highland edition, it's in terms of style. Yes, we changed. We wanted to have a different style presentation to the presentation, say, that we had on the 12-year-olds. And so that was one of the whiskies we were going to try. So are you happy to go ahead and we'll have a...
I have one.
You've already got it. I'm going to open a new bottle here. So
take your time. This one is on Johan.
This foresee already also.
we come prepared.
Yeah,
sure.
You started earlier than me, obviously.
Yeah, I started the day with a whiskey sour. No, not today. In the afternoon with a whiskey sour.
So I guess most of your colleagues know, blended malt is a funny description, and it's really better. It almost needs to be parked. Pure or vatted is so much better.
It's easier for the customers as well, because try to explain what is the difference from a blend and a blended malt. A lot of people don't get it. It's said it's written on the bottle. It's blended, so it has to be a blend. No, it isn't a real blend. So it's different.
It's so frustrating because you almost have to re-educate somebody, because they might say, "Oh, blended malt. I only want to drink single malts," and then you have to say to them, "Well, this is a combination of only single malt. You know, there's no grain in this whiskey. It's just single malts." And again, historically, when you had these small stills up in Scotland that were producing a lot of them were producing fairly sort of sketchy whiskies early on, and it was only by combining 4 or 5 of them, literally as a blend of single malts, that you started to get whiskies that were really palatable and consistent. This was long before the introduction of grain. And that was really the thing that actually helped develop the Scotch whisky industry. So I think a lot of people perhaps forget that if you go back in time, it was actually blended malt that was partly responsible for developing Scotch whisky.
Yeah, you can see it if you find some old bottles of the bigger whiskey brands. You see it on the bottles indicated pure malt, vatted malt.
Yes.
And for me, it was more easy in the past when, like Günther said, when you see vatted malt, pure malt, people asking you, what's that for a kind of thing? So you could explain, and now, they see the bottle and they see, the first thing, blended, and that's a blend. That's nothing for me because I'm looking for a single malt. So that's a little bit pity.
Yeah, it's like Mark saying, shot in the foot.
That is so accurate, because
that's right.
I think it was changed in the 90s, I think, and prior to that, at least it was easier to explain what it was. But
right.
Now I mean, hopefully people are coming back. There's a re-education going on. I mean, in my view, what should happen is that they should redefine it again and go back to explaining that it's pure malt. But the industry to some extent is dominated. The bigger companies wanted to change the description, and now I suspect they probably want to go back and change it to the way that it was.
That would be a good thing. I wrote also to the guys in Scotland several times from the beginning, because that was the worst. That the changing is not. I'm not.
It's
not
not ideal.
about it.
No, there was a discussion on social media. Sorry, Johan. There was a discussion on social media a few weeks ago, and I was following it, and it was about the lesser kind of whiskey, the blends, and everybody everybody who was defending the blends was talking about blended malts. Not to say blends are good, that's another story, but it was a funny fact because we were all talking about blended malts for Big Pete, for example, or all the others. So it's not clear to people what's the difference.
No, I mean, there are some fantastic blended malts out there. Absolutely fantastic.
One, for example, I really like this one.
Well, so this was launched in 2015, this Highland edition. We worked with John McDougall, who is a whiskey distiller and blender. He's got 50 plus years of experience. And we had some Balmenic, we had some Macduff. He basically brought together 7 whiskies that he felt would really sit together well. We put them back into a whiskey cask for 6 months, and then launched it in 2015 as our Highland edition. We bottle at 43%. I think that there's always a debate, should we bottle at higher strength? But for me, 43 is comfortable because it's approachable. If you go too high, then it obviously becomes more with alcohol duty, it becomes more expensive. And I think it just sort of sits at the right level. It's sort of goldish in color. I mean, I think you get for me, you get some sort of fruity sort of tones coming through.
Yeah.
For me, when you nose it, it throws me back in time. When I started to discover single malt in the early 90s. That was just after the whiskey craze, it was not a time like right now. There are
Are
many.
you that old, Johan?
Yes, I'm afraid yes. But there are many bottles available, many older whiskies, Highland styles, which I like very much. And when you have this smell, it threw me back to that time. This is really a style you don't find much these times.
I think. I guess what we're trying to do is and it's probably true pretty much most of the Deerstalker range, which is to have whiskies which are approachable, that you can tend to drink most occasions. And we'll go on to talk about the peated, but
yeah.
I think the aim of our blended malt was not to have something that was, if you like, super challenging, but to have something that was, if you were fairly new to Scotch whisky and you pick this up, would it be something that would entice you to try more whisky?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say probably it's sort of I'd like to achieve that.
Yeah, and the advantage or the thing with this is, okay, it's easy. It's for someone who never drunk single malt before, or someone who will discover. But even people who already know single malts for several years, they became happy to taste this because this has a lot of taste. It's not something you sip on and it's gone. It stays, it's joinable, and it has a nice fruity smell, but also a nice full taste. And that's the nice thing on this.
I would love to have this on a sunny afternoon or evening like now, and sipping it with your wife in Corona time. So it's really, really lovely to enjoy. Yeah.
Well, I think it's all about, I guess, what ultimately the whiskies you've got in it, and we've got more than the ones I've mentioned, but I think they certainly, I think they smooth it out enough. And as you say, it's something you could drink at most times. It's not what I would describe as massively challenging. It's something that's you can come to at different times, and you could drink it on a summer's day, which always, if you can drink it on a summer's day, then that's a fabulous position to be in, really.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, heading up to the peated one.
Yeah. We've never done a peated whiskey before, never on single cask bottlings or anything. And as I'm sure that sort of Johan will probably appreciate, if you're at a show, very often somebody will come along and say, what's the most peated whiskey that you've got? Mm-hmm. I've had that conversation with so many people. Well, I only drink peated whiskey. And what we wanted to do with our peated edition specifically was to have a peated blended malt that was lightly peated. And one of the reasons is that there's an awful lot of people who are doing more heavily peated blended malts and doing them brilliantly. So why would we, if you like, compete with that? So if you look at, this has got, in terms of sort of phenol parts per million, ppm, it's down at 19, whereas the big hitters in that segment are around about 49. So the specific aim of our sort of Deerstalker peated edition is, if somebody has been drinking Highland single malt and they want to try a peated whiskey, but they don't want to be sort of blown away, then this is a great entry point.
Yeah.
I think this is a little bit less or more the same. It's even someone who is not a big fan from peated single malts, but someone who wants to discover something new, maybe to take the first step to something peated. I think this is the same thing. It's very nice to try to start with, because you don't only have
It's not all smoke.
you have smoke, but you have also the fruitiness,
fruitiness,
other things. And that's the nice thing about it. It's very well balanced, and it's less or more the same like the first one. It's different, but it's even for peat lovers, peat monsters, or people who don't love it, they can try, they can start
Yeah.
something like this.
Okay. Mark is asking, are you allowed to disclose what's inside?
Well, what I can tell Mark is there's 6 whiskies in here. The oldest is 10, the youngest is 5. We finish it in Ardmore casks, and there is Ardmore in here, and there is an Isla malt in here, but I can't really sort of say more than that, if you like.
But it's one Isla whiskey.
There's one Isla whiskey in here,
Okay. Does it start with an A or a B or a C?
Why don't you ask me at the end of the session, because I might give you that information. So 6 whiskies, 5 between 5 and sort of 10 years. Again, John McDougall, who's got a lot more experience than I have, was the one who we spent a bit of time. I'd send whiskies to him, and he would play around with them. And I said all along, what I want to happen is for somebody to be able to drink that and not feel that they can taste nothing else for the rest of the evening.
Yeah.
Mark is happy.
But so, I mean, I think you get a sort of bit of iodine-y, sort of light peat, and then I think you get a bit of sort of burnt sort of wood type, but it's not really.
It's not that smoky.
No.
It's there, but it's in the background. It's.
Yeah. You have also some sweetness, some fruitness,
Yes.
a little bit of the wood, a little bit of the malt.
It's like you
very well
said,
balanced.
as a first for who's starting out with I want to try a peat version. It's a very good beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's good because if you take again a lot of ladies who come along and start, and they would say, peat. I don't think that is ever going to be for me. Peat is never going to be. And I think this isn't going to frighten anybody off. And what it's going to do is going to give you a chance to see if you like it. And if you like it, then you can go down that route. You can start delving into heavily peated whiskey. But again, if you're out with friends, you could have this almost as an aperitif, and it's not going to ruin the meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. And the whiskies that we'll taste after this, you'll still be able to taste. So that was really, as I say, that was the objective, getting it to sort of 19 ppm rather than up in the 40s. So, and the difference between the two, you can just about see it. So the Highland basically is all copper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this one has just.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, there you go. I mean, that's it. So the peated has got a sort of green to it.
Yeah.
Green sort of thing.
I can show it here. It's maybe easier.
That's better.
Easier. So the right one is the peated version with green, and the other one is the Highland.
Yeah,
So,
we picked the green. I guess it just it felt that was right for sort of peated. It would give people a bit of an idea. So these are both fairly new. We didn't launch the peated until 2017, so it's still fairly sort of new in terms of us sort of setting out down that route of introducing a peated whiskey under Deerstalker.
Yes, I'm also very happy with it to have something like that, because I don't know what's the reason, but in the past it was all the same packaging.
Yes.
But we only had some Breville bottlings, some Altabane, some Balmenach,
Yeah.
Now we have these two as basics, very nice to have. But beside this, we have also completely different things we didn't have in the past. What's the reason for that, or what make you choose that?
Well, one reason is probably supply.
Mm-hmm.
Deerstalker, we don't own a distillery, but we've been very lucky to work with Inverhouse and have Balmenic in the 12 way before my time. So a minimum of 50 to 60 years, Deerstalker 12-year-old has always been Balmenic. And so one reason, we will continue with that hopefully, but when you talk about out of Ben Braybal, what happened was we were buying, say, 3 or 4 casks, and then we would go back and say, look, we want to get some more. And it was at a time when it was actually quite difficult to get some of these. And so it was a supply, to one extent, it was a supply issue. With the 2 blended malts, we know we can source those whiskies, partly because they're not at 12 years of age. So when you get below 12, it's slightly easier to get malts because you're not sort of headlining it as 12. And also because if you're combining 7 single malts and you've got 1 at 7, 1 at 9, 1 at 10, you can actually you can produce a very, very nice whiskey. And I think we can achieve that, and we can get continuity of supply. So that was one of the main reasons to sort of create the category where we had these 2, Highland and a peated, because we're not going to be in a position where we could buy an Islay malt at 10 years of age and put the name on the label.
Yeah.
So our peated edition is essentially 6 peated whiskies and brought together, and we're not making a big deal about an age statement. But what we do know is that we can supply that from now going forwards. So I think that's probably the reason. And I think the blended malt segment, if you again part the name, is a segment which has a huge future, because you've got brilliant distillery bottlings, but there's an awful lot out there that if you bring them together sensibly, you can create a whiskey which is really palatable and easy to drink. So that's pretty much it's a sort of combination of supply and trying to sort of forecast what's happening in the market.
Okay.
I think with these blended malts, you have also something from it's from Deerstalker. It's yours. It's not something that everyone can copy or make or create and put on the market. So when that's a good one and you have what you have here for a reasonable price, I think that's very nice to have and to work with, because I'm very happy to have something like this, and I was really surprised when I contacted or recontacted you again after some years, that no one else is working with something like this, with such a product for such a price. So I was immediately thinking, something like that I like to have again, because and I was happy that no one was thinking about that for me. So that's really unique.
A year ago, I sent a mail to Paul, and I was asking him who's importing Deerstalker in Belgium for the moment. And Paul said, "If you want to, you can do it."
Well, I think what happens is that we tend to only work with a few folk, really, in the great scheme of things. And I think that what you want to do is you want to build that relationship over time, and then and we're not looking at hitting massive numbers. What I would prefer to see is we work together, and in 3 or 4 years' time, yes, the numbers are going up, but there isn't this rush of we have to hit X thousand. When we do a bottling, we're bottling 1,500 bottles. We're doing 2 or 3 casks. We're not trying to hit. What I prefer to do, is introduce something and build it over time, and then you build up a loyal customer base.
Yeah.
So, I think that's probably our philosophy. Probably is quite different from some of the big guys who've got to, if you like, to sell a certain amount of whiskey on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also the reason why I would have back the Deerstalker, because I like to promote, to sell something, to bring something to the people, where I also convinced and not some big brand, because you have to sell, because you have to reach your numbers and quantities and sales. So to start with, to come back in whiskey world, because I was gone for
For ages.
small time, a year and a half. I did some other things, so I came back, and it was really nice to have something like that you can really bring to the people, because you're convinced in and you know what it is, and yeah.
And the old school guys even know it.
Yes. That was,
That brings us to another bottle of yours. I tried it earlier on, and I was in love at first sip again. The 12-year-old.
So that, as you see, that packaging is quite different from the, if you like, the original.
There's still a Deerstalker on it.
Yeah, it's a modern day Deerstalker, and you can see he's wearing a hat, and he's got a spyglass, and he's looking out down a glen, and I just think it's a bit more of a sort of contemporary sort of design for today. I think the older design probably had its place, but if you're trying to ultimately, if you're on a shelf, you've got to try and create some impact. And I think probably our that sort of presentation and the copper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Basically, I think that has more impact than probably the traditional. And even though it's the same whiskey, it was time really just to, I think, give the presentation just a bit more of an update. Mm-hmm. And again, it's got a Deerstalker on it, and I think the old presentation, the Deerstalker, some people couldn't quite recognise exactly the character, and the pose on this is much more. That's how you would see a stalker. If you Google Deerstalker, those are the images you're likely to see. So I think that's a more modern day presentation. And the whiskey is Balmenic, which, if people don't know Balmenic, as I say, it's owned by Inverhouse. It's been one of going back to the days when it was owned by United Distillers, it was one of the key components in Johnnie Walker. Balmenic Distillery is just near Granton-on-Spey, so it's in the southern part of Speyside. Literally, as you leave Granton-on-Spey and you carry on north, it's off to the right-hand side. It's near what's called the Hawes of Cromdale, and I suppose the character of Balmenic, the stills are quite short, so you tend to get quite a rich sort of meaty spirit. Even though this is not, it doesn't look as if it's going to be really, really super heavy, but for me, Balmenic is just I have a lot of time for Inverhouse. I think they do a fantastic job. Their wood management is great. The whiskies they produce are super, and so I think but because they've got Old Pulteney, Speyburn, Balmenic has never really been something that they've been bottling as a distillery bottling. So there's always been a bit of a gap, and because we worked with them for a long time, we're able to get 12-year-old Balmenic, and that, I think that's always it's just about the perfect age. Getting 18 is fantastic, but it's tough to get 18-year-olds. So I think for me, it's just as a Highland malt at age 12, I think it sort of has a bit of everything, because I think that it has a sort of freshness about it. I mean, I think you can pick up barley and heather to me, but after a while, there's also some spice to it. So
Yeah. Really spiced, yeah.
And again, we're bottling that at 43%. We have done it higher. We did it at 46. But what I found was that we were sitting on a shelf next to other whiskies that were all at 43. And nobody appreciated that it was 46%.
Mm-hmm.
But we were paying a heavier duty. So it just seemed a bit pointless to have something. If people realized it was 46, then fine. But we weren't really helping ourselves, so we took it back down to 43. I think this has been the backbone. We've been bottling. Deerstalker's been associated, as I say, for probably about 50 years with Balmain.
But it will be a standard edition, this 12-year-old.
So, sorry, say again?
This is going to be a standard edition, the 12-year-old?
It's the whisk. It will always be the our 12 will always be Balmain.
Yeah.
He says confidently, but yeah, the plan is that we will always continue with. So if you have a 12-year-old Deerstalker, it will be Balmain. We don't. It's not mentioned on the label anymore, but it is the distillery that we've worked with, and hopefully will continue to work with.
Okay. And will there be others 12-year-old, or you're only gonna stay with this one, this 12-year-old?
I think with this presentation, I think that we will stay just with Balmain. But we've got the limited release, which I'll talk a little bit about. And the limited release are single cask bottlings. And so if, for example, we got a cask of a 12-year-old that was really interesting, we might bottle it, but it would come under the limited release.
Okay.
If, again, we did do, when we started with Deerstalker, we had 10-year-old, 12, 15, and 18 under the sort of previous presentation. And what we're doing now is we have the two blended malts, the peated and the Highlands, 12-year-old Highland single malt, and then we have limited release. If we, for example, launched at 10, then we would do that under slightly different. It would be a slightly different presentation, but it's really down to where would that fit within the portfolio, and does it make sense to? Are people looking for a particular style of whiskey, and can we get hold of that whiskey?
It's like the bottle on the right, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is again, this is fairly new for us. A few years, we've always been asked to do single cask bottlings, and we did. So we started that, and the way we're doing our single cask bottlings is we're obviously distillery name, date that it's bottled, sequentially numbered bottles, tasting notes. So this is an example of one which is North British, and basically you can see on that. Although it's not that clear, it has a huge amount of information. But I think if you're doing a single cask, you do want to know. You want to know the cask number, when it was bottled, specific date, and that's much better. Yeah. So it gives you the style of barrel, everything that I think you need if you're going to be going down the route of single cask bottlings.
And will all be they will all be at 48%, or they will be more or less high?
Well, that's a good question. 48 was the plan. We did a Ben Nevis 2 years ago, and I sent that sample to a couple of people, and they said, I think this would be better to do this at 52. There's always an argument to do it at full cask strength. But the only issue I have with full cask strength is that you're really not getting very many bottles from a bottling. So you reduce the number of bottles, and at 48, for me, you could drink it straight.
Yeah.
at full cask strength, I would always dilute it slightly. So for me, it just I'm quite comfortable at 48, but I know there's a lot of people who would much prefer to have just cask strength. So I wouldn't say we have any hard and fast rule. For example, if we had access to a cask and I sent both of you a sample, and you both said, "Look, do this at a higher strength," then fair enough. That's what we'll probably do, because I think it's what sort of feels best for the whiskey, really.
Okay, so you don't say no, you say maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's good for the whiskey.
Possible.
Well, again, there's so many brilliant cask strength malts out there that if there was a chance, if we got something and it definitely had to be done at cask strength, fine. But 48, I don't think the feedback has been pretty good. It makes it slightly more affordable. That's another issue. So it brings it perhaps into a segment where people can buy a whiskey at 48%, and it still gives people an option to drink it straight or to dilute a little bit.
Okay, I have one more question for you, because we are at the end of our show, you see. What's your favorite whiskey yourself?
Well, that's it. I think two things. It depends when you're drinking it. If you're drinking, say now, summertime, I would go for something slightly lighter. So, like if you take the Highland blended malt, I would, if we were finishing now and I would drink that. If we were drinking in the middle of winter, I would go for something bigger. I would go for perhaps one of our limited release. I like the Space Side that we've got. Actually, is a really nice underrated whiskey, the limited release, because Space Side Distillery isn't that well known. That is a really nice. It's a little bit sweet, but it's got some sort of citrusy flavors. And when I come to Belgium, that's one of the ones we'll be doing a tasting on. That actually is an interesting whiskey. So I should ask you the same question. What would be your whiskey?
For the moment, I have to try the North British and the Invergordon because they are still closed. But later on, I will try this one. For now, it's the peated one.
Okay.
It's the blended malt peated at this moment.
Okay. Well, as long as there's something for everybody, that's really, I guess, the objective.
Yeah. There was one more question from Patrick. If you leave it at Castwing, don't you reach more people? He's asking. It's a difficult question.
You tend to reach the people that are definitely just drinking cask strength. At 48, I think sometimes you reach people who are normally drinking cask strength, but will make an exception because they're interested in trying that whiskey. And you also tap into people who are maybe drinking a 43% whiskey and haven't got into that segment and think, I'll give that a try. And it's slightly less expensive than the full cask strength.
Yeah, it's a good answer. Johan, what's your favorite?
I taste some, further also the North British, the Invergordon 31, also the 18. For me, my preference is the Invergordon 31. A little bit the same reason. It threw me really back to the old style of whiskey making when I began drinking.
Young boy.
The early 90s. Then the style was a little bit different. I think they had a little bit more time to let it age it the right way in the casks and things. There are many stocks, so these times you see more and more distilleries bring out some no age statements. It's not particularly that it's bad, but it's different. And the old style, it's hard to find. Certainly hard to find something that is payable and when you bought it that you can open and drink. So there are some, but when I have to pay a few hundreds of euros, then it's not really fun to drink or to have something to drink like that. But the Invergordon is very payable for everyone, and 31 is nice to have, not because it's 31, but it's really the style I like, the Highland style. Old Vetterkern, old Pulteney. There are things that stay less or more in the range. You have a little bit of everything in these whiskies. Some malt, single malt, the malt, the honey, the vanilla of the cask, some wood. It's very wide in taste, in nose, and that's something you can sip on 100 times or even more, and you discover every few minutes something new, some other taste and flavors, and it's really nice. And when you take it in your mouth, it's not burning, it's soft, it's full of flavor, and it's a little bit the same story, and that's something I like.
Thank
and
you.
I would pay something a little bit more than regular for it.
Okay, you guys, thank you very much. Wait for me in the back room, and I will come back to you later on. So, Johan, thank you, and I will see you in a while.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Pleasure. Well, hopefully we'll
nice
meet
to have you also, because I also know the story through the years, but it's much more fun if you tell it to us and I can listen.
You've got the hat. You look the part.
Yes, I have it. So I ordered whiskey, but I got this.
Well, you can't have everything.
You will keep on wearing it. So we will say goodbye. See you later on. Ciao. Then we have you, Paul. Thank you very much for going online with us. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thanks for putting this together. It's a great way of communicating at what is a pretty difficult time for everybody. So this is it's good just to get out there and have a chance to have a conversation. So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. I hope to meet you someday in the flesh, and not so far away future.
Yep.
I
Give me your hat size and I'll bring a hat for you.
Okay, it's a deal. It's a deal. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye. Talk to you soon.
Goed zo. Wel, beste mensen, Mark heeft het al gevraagd, wat zijn de prijzen? Dus ik geef de prijzen ook alweer. Dit zijn de adviesprijzen van de verdeler, dus die zouden normaal gezien overal ongeveer hetzelfde moeten kosten. Dan zien jullie dat de Blended Highland Edition 39,95 is, de Blended Peated Edition 41,95, wat ik persoonlijk hele goede prijs vind. De 12 jaar oude 46,95, de 18 jaar oude €95. En dan heb je nog andere single glass, de North British en de Invergordon 99,95 en €110. Dus zeer, zeer mooie prijzen. Als je alvast wil genieten, want het staat nog niet op onze website, mail ons zeker van vast, dus dat komt dik in orde. Wat heb ik dan nog te melden? Dat is ook niet minder belangrijk. Volgende week, ik ben te snel, zaterdag aanstaande, voor alle dames onder jullie, join ons, want het is Florent Buchet. Mijn vrouw is hevige fan, en niet alleen omwille van zijn rums, ik ga me daar niet verder over uitlaten, want ze kijkt mee. Volgende week woensdag hebben we Patrick Prot en Bert Dex van Beacon Spirits en Liquid Art, en dan hebben we onze Whisky Ambassador of the Year, Jurgen Vromans komt ons ook vergezellen. Chris Lauriers komt ook nog langs. Juliette Bekend van Glenelachie komt nog langs. Bob Minnekeer gaat ons ook nog bezoeken op 30 mei. Staat er nog niet op, heeft vanmiddag juist bevestigd. En dan hebben we 3 juni is Mark Westmoreland en Fergus Simpson gaat ook nog langskomen. En daar zullen er sowieso nog een aantal volgen. Dus dat even allemaal ter promo. We moeten ook iets doen voor grote kost. Dus bij deze ga ik jullie bedanken. Ik ga nog even naar mijn gasten toe. Fijne avond, bedankt en tot zaterdag alvast. En Mark de Mul, alvast tot morgen. Ik heb gehoord dat ik u ga bezoeken in de studio, dus ik kijk er alvast naar uit. Tot morgen, tot ziens en tot zaterdag. Adieu.